My name is Princess, and this is my reflection in color.
Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Reflections in Color. My name is Ewune Wane, and I am the founder of Minds Over Melanin. And today we have with us Princess Agbobock. So Princess is a mommy, an auntie, a wife, an educator, a YouTube content creator, an entrepreneur, and a servant leader. She was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and a proud graduate of University of Houston. That's where I go, and a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She has worked in education for 7 years, 4 years as a biology health science teacher, and 3 years as an instructional specialist. During her tenure in education, she and her husband founded the A-Team Initiative, which is a mentorship and leadership development program for high school students. Her work in education has served as a catalyst for discovering her purpose and a path through which she's been able to deal with her own personal struggles. As a result, she is now studying clinical psychology with a concentration in marriage and family therapy. In addition, she runs an online beauty boutique called I Am Princess Beauty, which was inspired by her years in creating beauty content on YouTube. Princess's accomplishments have not come without a wealth of adversity, neglect, and trauma. More specifically, her childhood was full of instability due to an absent father and a mother who struggled with drug addiction and mental health issues that were exacerbated by a history of unresolved abuse. As a result of her experiences, she has dedicated her life's work to serving young people, women, and families. By sharing her story, she hopes to be a beacon of light that inspires those in pain to keep pushing. Princess hopes to be a living example of it gets better because it does. Hi, Princess.
Hi, Une. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for joining me on Reflections in Color. I'm very happy to have you as a guest.
Absolutely. I'm so honored to be sitting here with you and to have an opportunity to share my story with your audience. So, thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dig in. In September, it was actually Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I know we're in October now, but I really wanted to kind of dedicate more than a month to domestic violence because this is something that happens every day. And I know you have some personal experiences with that, and we're going to discuss that in the interview today. And I hope from this interview, people know that one, they're not alone. Two, it does get better. And three, most importantly, how you can make it better. So giving people relevant, culturally relevant tools to help them figure out a way out to safety as well as happiness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So let's dig into the definition. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. How would you, in your own words, describe domestic violence?
I would describe domestic violence as a cycle of abuse or violence between intimate partners that it seems to me that the goal of domestic violence is to break and diminish that person's sense of self and to isolate them from their support system and things and people and places that give them empowerment for the sole purpose of feeding into whatever inadequacies that the perpetrator of the abuse has. So, a lot of times it can be their own insecurities with themselves, their own trust issues, and sometimes even their own trauma. So it's a way to control you by pushing their pain onto you.
I like the way you framed it
Thank you.
because you made the abuser a little more human as well, right? So this person has their own issues and they're projecting onto the other person, and they're doing that by utilizing different ways of having power or control over that person.
Absolutely. Definitely a lot of manipulation.
What are the different types of abuse?
This is a
I'm sorry.
no good.
I know when I talk with my patients about domestic violence, even with other people, I like to say that there's a certain look to domestic violence, and we tend to push the other strategies aside. So we know the battered woman, for example, right? Bruises on the face, the body, the busted lips, broken ribs, for example. But what if the woman doesn't have bruises, right? And she says she's being abused. It's like, well, you look fine to me,
Mhm.
right? Are there other ways that a person can have control or power over a person without laying their hands on them?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you're bringing this up because this is a huge misconception. Unfortunately, some people think that only abuse comes in one form, and in most cases, that's the physical, form. Someone physically enacting violence on you, the type of violence that causes bruises, cuts, and scrapes and broken bones. But abuse, it comes in so many different forms. It can be psychological abuse, it can be emotional abuse, sexual abuse. People don't realize that, yes, in intimate partner relationships, you can be raped, you can be forced to have sex against your will.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even spiritual abuse, that's something that I faced in my abusive relationship. My partner even took my connection to church, my faith, something that gave me strength, and used that to manipulate me and made going to church seem like I was cheating on him. He used whatever he could, anything that empowered me, that gave me a sense of self or being, he took that from me. And he used that to manipulate me to do what he wanted me to do, or to make me feel guilty for going against him. So not all bruises and cuts and scrapes from abuse are able to be seen with the naked eye. They're internal. They're in your mind. They're in your heart. They're in the perception of yourself that you see. And it's a mask that's worn.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you won't. And I myself didn't even realize I was being abused, because to me, abuse came in the form of physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
It took a minute for me to realize that I was in an abusive relationship. My relationship eventually escalated into physical abuse. But had I been educated, or had I known, or had it been a topic that was talked about specifically in the Black community amongst Black women, about what abuse looks like, what unhealthy and unstable relationships look like, I would have seen those red flags long ago, and I wouldn't have just brushed them off as him loving me so much. So definitely isn't just physical violence. It's a
Absolutely.
myriad of things. Abuse is multidimensional and multifaceted.
Absolutely. In session with some of my patients, I show them what is called the wheel of power and control,
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of discusses what you mentioned earlier, in that the goal of abuse in any form is to have power and control over a person.
Yeah.
That's it. And sometimes they use physical strategies to do that, but they don't have to. There's other ways. So one of them is financial abuse.
Mm.
This is where you limit, one, the person having a job outside the home, you give them allowance. Sometimes the allowance is conditional on their behavior. So if you're being a good girl or a good boy, for example, or they make you earn it by doing certain things for them, right? And so the person lacks any type of independence, and you're solely dependent on that person. One of the reasons many people who are in abusive relationships don't leave is because of finances. They have nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect of it. Another one is emotional abuse. So this is where you're putting the person down, you're making them feel bad, you're saying really crude things to them, for example, or you punish them through the silent treatment. I don't talk to you, I shut you out. Another popular one that a lot of social media accounts have discussed is gaslighting. That is another form of emotional, even mental abuse. It's manipulation. The
Yes.
person's words are being twisted and misconstrued, and you're trying to deflect from whatever is bothering them that they're trying to discuss, all to kind of make you look good and other person look inadequate to some degree.
Yes.
And there's so many. And of course, we have the physical, but then we also have social abuse. That's the isolation piece. That's what you discussed earlier as well. So keeping the person away from family and friends or any person you associate yourself with, they have a problem with, making you feel uncomfortable, putting you in a position where you kind of have to choose. And again, it's easier to control a person when they're by themselves.
Yes.
It's harder to control a person when they have a support system that's like, no, this is not correct. You need to leave, or don't worry about money. We got you. The other person has options. And the goal pretty much is to take all the options away, keep them to themselves, and leave that person with nothing and dependent on that person, essentially. And there's so many other ways.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you.
So you mentioned unhealthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference between an abusive relationship and an unhealthy one? And if so, what is the difference?
That's a good question. In my personal opinion, I believe that there's a very fine line between being in an unhealthy relationship and being in an abusive relationship. Oftentimes, using the term or the verbiage, I'm in an unhealthy relationship is usually a precursor to the escalation of abusive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's also used as a way to minimize an abusive relationship. So instead of people owning the fact that, yes, you are in an abusive relationship, they will minimize the severity of it by just saying it's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to put a mask or a piece of tape or a little Band-Aid over it so that it doesn't sound as bad as it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also feel that, as I kind of stated just a second ago, that it is the doormat. You're standing on the doormat, of an abusive relationship. It's like you're teetering, you're crossing a line. And any relationship that you can call unhealthy, any interaction with an intimate partner that you deem unhealthy, is not a relationship that you need to be in. Any person that loves you, that tries to minimize who you are or take you away from things that are important to you, that don't support you, that push you down and makes you feel bad about yourself at any given time. I don't care if it happens once a month, once a week, every day.
Right.
That's not okay. Because the only way for that to go is up. The only way for that to get is worse.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start to notice those patterns of behavior where, from time to time, this person is this way or that way with you, and if it's cyclical in any kind of way, that's a red flag. And you need to really pay attention to that and begin to figure out how you're going to pull away from that. So I think it's a fine line. And it's one that I wouldn't recommend anyone, teeter over.
I agree with you. I would say it's a fine line as well. I try to change my verbiage when I discuss abusive relationships. Instead, I like to call them relationships with abuse because there's so many highs and lows.
Absolutely.
And so I do agree with you that unhealthy aspects of relationship are the beginnings of an abusive relationship or a relationship with abuse. Absolutely. Because it's little things. It's looking through someone's phone behind their back, for example, going through someone's email without their information or without their consent, right? Or consent is not a part of, the sex, for example. It's little things that start to add up to big things. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And, relationships have their ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships are not perfect. And I think people mix up, the imperfections of relationships, the part where you're getting to know someone and you're learning someone, and you're learning how to compromise with different belief systems or different customs or different ways. That's totally different.
Right.
Working on finding compromise and learning how to communicate better with each other. It's a relationship should truly be give and take. But if you feel like you're always giving, and that person is always taking, that's not a part of the normal journey in a relationship. There should be compromise. And if your partner, if you're in what you deem an unhealthy relationship, and that's largely because your partner doesn't want to compromise, doesn't want to, work on themselves as you work on yourself, that's a problem. And that's, again, a red flag. And that's not a sign of a healthy relationship that's going through normal highs and lows.
I agree. I agree. There's definitely the getting to know you stage. And it's anticipated that there's going to be some headbutts, right? Because it's two different people trying to come together as one. So there is going to be some arguments. And that's one thing I would like to clarify is that it's normal to have an argument in a relationship. There will always be conflict, and there is no relationship without conflict. There's no relationship without attitude. There's no relationships about disagreements and things like that. But how are you resolving that conflict? And like you said, is one person consistently giving more than the other person? Is one person's feelings significantly dismissed compared to other person's, and is it not balanced to some degree? It doesn't have to be perfectly similar because there's different needs, right? But there should be some equal flow back and forth, like you suggested.
Right. And one other thing I would like to add too is that, the pressures of a relationship reveal who your partner is. It is those moments when you have those really difficult times, those really hard moments, those really, tough discussions that you have to have, or those, situations that really bring you guys to a head, and you have to really, do the work, because relationships are work. And when you have to do the work, that should reveal who your partner is. If your partner responds to those types of circumstances with violence, by demeaning you, by breaking you down, by dismissing, what's happening in your relationship, and without, this is important, taking accountability,
Yes.
That's a problem, that's an issue, and so those hard, rough spots in your relationship truly reveal who your partner is. That's what you need to really pay attention to. How does your partner handle disagreements, or rough patches within your relationship when things are really, really, really hard?
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't result with them treating you as if you're not worthy.
Mm-hmm. I agree. There should always be a manner of respect, regardless.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about you personally. You have had a history with a relationship that involved abuse. And, if you're willing, I would love to discuss that more with you in detail.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I would like to start from the beginning. So the beginning, how did you meet him? What attracted you to him initially?
So, funny thing is, we actually went to the same middle school together. Um, and everybody liked him. He was popular. All the girls liked him, and I was not interested at all. I had so many things going on in my life. I just wasn't interested in boys. But I thought he was cute. He was just really popular. So I always remembered that about him in school. And we just so happened to cross paths in our adulthood at church. And we saw each other, and we instantly remembered who each other were, and we just connected and exchanged numbers and began to talk, never with the intentions of a relationship, just reconnecting with childhood friends. But as we talked, we realized that we had a lot in common. His mother also had a drug addiction.
Mm.
She succumbed to her drug addiction. He and his siblings were displaced, went into the foster care system. They were moved around a lot. He ended up being raised by his aunt, and I identified with him. My mom also had a drug addiction, and at the time I met him, she was like really in the thick of her drug addiction. I too had been a part of the CPS system. My brothers and sisters and we were separated as children. Some of us ended up in foster care. A lot of, we were adopted by other family members. I was torn apart from my family just like he was. And so it was almost as though I saw a kinship with him. And it was, that savior complex that I have. I want to fix people. I want to save people. He's hurting. I'm hurting. But I feel like maybe I'm stronger than him because look at me. I was able to overcome. I've come a lot further in my life than he has. So maybe I can help him, and maybe we can support each other. And then it was also the shame, like I said, my mother was in the thick of her addiction still at that time. And just knowing that, whoever I chose to be in a relationship with would also know about my family history. And just knowing that he understood because he came from a background that was similar to mine, I felt that I would have no judgment, that he wouldn't judge me. He wouldn't judge some of the things that I've been through and some of the things that I had to do in order to survive. And he wouldn't judge my family. So it was, in essence, finding a kinship with someone who understood a part of my life that many people, don't understand because they haven't gone through the things that I've gone through. And I found comfort in that. So that's what initially attracted me to him. And that's kind of what spurred our relationship. We bonded over pain.
Okay. It sounds a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong, like trauma bonding.
Absolutely.
For those who aren't aware, can you tell us what trauma bonding is?
So trauma bonding is basically kind of what I explained. It's finding kinship and a reflection of yourself in the pain of somebody else. Feeling that this person is a reflection of me and I'm a reflection of this person because we've been through the same thing. We can sit down and we can share stories and we can relate to each other's stories. It's a safe place to talk about some of the things that we've gone through, but it's also a safe place to not resolve our own issues. So we can sit and we can talk about these things and we can choose not to deal with them and to gloss over them, and it's okay because this person is not going to hold me accountable for the process I need to go through to heal, because we're kind of wallowing in our own trauma together. So, it's not really a lot of accountability. We didn't have a lot of accountability with each other. I never told him, you need to deal with what you're going through. Let's talk about it. And he never told me, you need to deal with what you're going through. It's just kind of a pity party, but we found comfort in that because we understood each other and there was no pressure to be anything but that, to be comfortable in where we were. There was no push to grow beyond it.
Okay. So that kind of is one caveat of a trauma bond, because part of it, like you said, is just a person who really understands and you don't have to do as much explaining, which can also be nice. But like you said, the other part is the kind of in the dirt with you. And it's like, we're good here. We see each other here. We enjoy each other here. And there's no push, like you said, to grow and to develop beyond that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So he was understanding. Did he stay that way?
He did. But the only thing that he didn't like, the difference between he and I was that he totally detached himself from his family. He didn't want any parts with his family. He was very he dealt with them very distantly, very cold sometimes. And that, I think, had to do with a lot of the resentment and anger that he had. He pick and choose when he wanted to be around them. He just really wasn't that engaging with his family. But for me, I was still very connected to what was going on with my family. So there would be times where I would go and, spend time with my mom. I would check on her. I would take her to the hospital, take her to the doctor. We have family interventions, so I was still very, very engaged in what was going on, although it was a complete mess. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, so I was a mother figure to my siblings as well. So I didn't just isolate myself as a way to kind of forget about what was going on. I still had to, in essence, put my family on my back. And I still had to, I was the glue to my family. And in the midst of all the turmoil and everything that was going on, I still had the responsibility of keeping everything together. I had to hold it all together. That was a lot of responsibility on me. And that was something that he didn't really like because it took attention away from him. So anytime I needed to jump up and go and take care of something that had to do with one of my brothers or sisters, or if I had to, do something for my mom, he didn't like it. He wasn't a fan of it because he wanted 100% of my attention and my time and my focus on him. So although we had shared history and shared trauma, the way we dealt with it was totally different. The way we dealt with our families was totally different. And he expected me to handle my family the same way that he handled his. And that's where we bumped heads.
I want to go back to a statement you made. few seconds ago, that he wanted 100% of your attention and your time.
Yes.
Who you are now and what you understand about relationships now, what does that tell you? If someone wants 100% of your time, what is that saying?
That's toxic. It's very toxic. It means that he has no sense of self. He has he's very codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And he has some issues with just knowing who he was and what his purpose is, and his identity was wrapped up in our relationship. And whenever I wasn't there, whenever I wasn't around, or whenever I did anything outside of our relationship, whether it was with friends or family, when I still had friends before he pushed them all the way, he didn't understand it, because to him, he was my life and I was supposed to be his life, and that was the end of that.
Right.
So it was very toxic, and that's how he began to isolate me, because I started to feel bad. I started to feel bad for him. He manipulated my feelings. Anytime I went to do anything, even church, it was, well, you're gonna leave me by myself. He would manipulate me by saying, you're gonna leave me all alone. And because I know his history, and I know what it feels like to be abandoned by your parents, because his father wasn't around either, and neither was mine.
Mm-hmm.
We both dealt with abandonment issues from our parents, and he knew that. He knew how to play on the things that pull my heartstrings. He knew how to play on my trauma, because we had shared trauma. He knew how to play on my trauma to manipulate me, to feel bad for him, so that I would push aside the things that mattered to me, that were important to me, and that made me who I was, to fold me into his identity. So in his mind, I was him and he was me. There was no separation. I couldn't be my own person.
Mm. I'm finding it kind of confusing. Wasn't he popular?
In middle school, yes.
Not as an adult, that didn't transfer.
I think so. He was so different. He was so different as an adult than he was um in middle school. Like, he seemed so much more confident, so much more self-assured. And as an adult, he was very insecure. He was afraid of me uh talking to other guys, like literally, if we were at the gas station and someone looked over at me, he would look at me and say, "Do you know that guy? Why is he looking at you that way? You must be talking to him. You've been talking to him on the phone." Like, it would like start this litany of questioning, and interrogation, just because someone looked at me. I had to know who he was, because otherwise he wouldn't have looked at me that way. So he was very insecure. And I was confused by that myself, because that's not who I remembered. I remembered a popular, outgoing, young man who was fighting all the girls off with a broom.
Yeah.
And now he's this insecure guy, who gets shaken up by another man just glancing over at his girlfriend. So I was really confused by that also.
Hmm. Okay. You've taken me into the next question, so thanks for the segue. Did you notice any red flags? And how did you process the red flags that you noticed?
Well, the first red flag I noticed was definitely his neediness, the clinginess. At first, I just brushed it off as, the relationship is new. He's enjoying spending time with me. He just really likes me. So, I just brushed it off as that, something just being fresh and new. And, he was excited about it, and he just wanted to be around me all the time. But as our relationship, got a little deeper, I realized that it just wasn't, him, enjoying the relationship, that it was a more pressing issue. It turned into arguments. It turned into, and I go back to church again, because it's the most innocent thing that anybody could do. But I would go to church, and he would accuse me of dating someone at church. Why do you want to go to church so much? Before he and I met, I was very active in church. I sang in the choir. I was a part of the praise dance ministry. I was very active. I served, in multiple capacities as a volunteer. So I was at church maybe 3 or 4 times a week. But in his mind, the only reason I was at church that much was because there was a man there that I was interested in. And so every time I got ready to go to church, we argued. We argued to the point that I would be in tears. And it got to the point to where I didn't want to go to church anymore. Mm-hmm. Because something as simple and innocent as going to church turned into me being put on stand and being interrogated, and I got afraid. I started to be afraid to tell him I was going to go somewhere. And then it went from me telling him I was going somewhere to me asking him, if it was okay. Are you okay with me going here? Are you okay with me going there? Seeking his approval. Mm-hmm. And and then it got to where if he can't go with me, then I'm not going to go. But then if he went somewhere with me and we were around people that he didn't know, he was again angry because I was giving my attention to people that he didn't know, and he was there with me. So I should have been giving my 100% attention to him and not the people that I was there with. So it started to, it went from being cute jealousy to this very toxic process, this very toxic, conversational structure that we had to have if I wanted to do anything that was outside of him. Mm-hmm. And it just eventually became so restrictive and so stressful to me that I just stopped going places. I stopped doing things. I stopped accepting invitations, to different events. And eventually he began to push all of my friends away. Everyone. He would go on my phone, call people.
Wow.
He got access to my phone records at one point in time and called every number that was in my call history and interrogated every male that answered the phone. And I was getting phone calls from my childhood friends who were males, who I consider my brothers, who now I don't even have contact with. I don't know where they are. I don't know how to get in contact with them, but I consider them like my brothers. And that hurts me to this day. But he pushed them away. They would tell me, Princess, I love you. You're like my sister, but as long as you are in a relationship with this man, I can't have anything to do with you, because he was disturbing their home. So they were in relationships. So he was calling them, interrogating them about me, and then their significant others were hearing, this dialogue, and now it brought into question the fidelity of their partner, because why is this man calling you about his girlfriend if this is supposed to be an innocent friendship? And so it just exploded. And he did that with all of my male friends. And at the time, ironically, all of them were in relationships, and none of them wanted to remain, friends with me, because it was spilling over into their homes.
Right.
And that was painful, And so slowly but surely, he began to push away my entire support system. Anybody who would have talked any sense into me, he pushed them away.
I would like to pause you because I'm sure there's some more red flags. But how did you handle that? Like him getting your phone records, calling people, harassing them. And I'm sure you weren't, well, I assume you weren't there at that time when you find out about it because you get a call from the person later. How did you handle that conversation with that friend? And the second part of my question is, did you say anything to him about that?
I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe that someone would go that far. I just couldn't believe it. So initially, when I started to get the phone calls from my friends and they trickled in, I didn't realize what had happened. I got one phone call and I was thinking, okay, well, maybe that was just, one incident. Maybe he went through my phone or something and got that phone number and called that person. And maybe there was just one incident, but then that one call turned into two, turned into three, and turned into four. And I just couldn't believe it. And so actually, he was very bold about it. When I got home, because we were living together at the time, when I got home, he had my phone records sitting on a table with a highlighter of every phone number that he had called. And I was so embarrassed. It was so embarrassing, because now people in my social circle are talking amongst themselves about this crazy guy that has called and uprooted their homes. They're all arguing with their significant others, and I mean, it was embarrassing. I just wanted to go in a closet and hide. And so I went, when I walked in and I saw it, I just, I was shook. I mean, I was speechless at first. And I asked him, I said, so how, how did you get my phone records? And it turns out that he had someone, a friend of his, who knew, who got my phone records for him, who worked for the phone company that I had, which I'm sure is against the law.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's against the law.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he got my phone records, and and I asked him, I was like, why? Why would you embarrass me that way? Why would you do that? And actually, what caused this behavior to happen is I started withholding intimacy from him. At this point in our relationship, I had fallen out of love with him. I didn't love him anymore. I stayed because I was scared. I just felt stuck. I had very low self-esteem. He would tell me all the time, nobody's going to love you like I do. Nobody else is going to want you. You're damaged goods. Nobody's going to understand, what you've been through. Nobody is going to accept your family. Who's going to marry you into their family and your mom is a crackhead? Like, those are the things that he would tell me. Right. And so, sorry, I'm trying to fight back tears. But, I just, I was, I was mortified, and I was so embarrassed because now the world knew, people that I was hiding it from. I try to smile and, make it seem like everything was okay. But people knew now. People knew if they thought something was wrong, now they have evidence and now they know something isn't right. And like I said, what spurred this behavior is when I decided that I wanted to become celibate, and I withheld intimacy from him. And when I decided to become celibate within our relationship, I actually had a conversation with him about it. And I told him, from a spiritual perspective, why I was choosing to do this, or why I felt like I needed to do this, at this time in my life. And the very first thing he said was that I must be having sex with somebody else. Mm-hmm. But I didn't love him anymore. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be intimate with him anymore. I felt at that point, in our relationship that I was being used like a toilet, and every time he, approached me, for that type of, interaction, I cried. It's not something that I wanted to do, and so that's what spurred him, that's what caused him to do that. Because he felt like I had to be talking to somebody else. It had to be another man. If I'm going to withhold intimacy from him, it's because I'm having sex with somebody else. So that's what caused that to happen. So we had a conversation about it. Mostly, it was a whole bunch of whys and unanswered questions, and finally he just came out and, with a ton of expletives, telling me that I was having sex with somebody else and he was going to find out who it was. So, I mean, there wasn't much more to talk about, at that point, because at that point, it was just my word against his, my word against what he felt and what he thought his truth was. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that was just, yeah.
I can imagine how that would feel, because those insult to injury.
Yeah.
You're already dealing with the pain, and now he's put it on Front Street. Everyone knows, and you're embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at that time you were, becoming the woman that you are now, and you're presenting yourself in a certain light. Mm-hmm. And he completely dissimulated that.
Completely broke it, and we're taught to be strong Black women. Mm-hmm. We're taught to not allow anyone to push us around, not to allow anyone to push, not to be a pushover, not to be a doormat. And here I was being a pushover, being a doormat, allowing this man to mistreat me, and I was dealing with it, and it was embarrassing. It goes against everything that we're taught in our culture to be. We're taught to be that strong Black woman that doesn't take any mess from anybody. But that wasn't what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And, I remember growing up telling myself, because I witnessed my mother being physically abused, and so I remember growing up saying to myself, I would never allow a man to treat me that way. I would never stay in a relationship where I don't feel that I'm being valued. And here I am, going against everything that I said I would never be and I would never do. It was a moment of reckoning, for myself, for me. And it was definitely, embarrassing. I was mortified.
I can only imagine. How was your wellness at that time? Were you taking care of yourself at all?
No. And as a matter of fact, I was probably suicidal. And it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to take my life. I don't know. It's just that you get to a point to where you have so much pain, where you're hurting so bad that you don't really know what else to do, but to go to sleep. And I remember I used to tell him, I just want to go to sleep. I just want to go to sleep and I don't want to wake up. I just need peace. I wasn't okay because I was dealing with that abusive relationship. I was dealing with my mother's addiction. I was trying to, keep the facade of being strong. I was in school. I was working. I was in the process of becoming a member of DST. I had a lot on my plate. Yeah. And I was trying to wear a different face for each facet of my life. And, I was trying not to, keep up that facade of strength, and I was trying to keep it all together because I had so many people depending on me. I couldn't fall apart. And to fall apart would means that everybody else that depends on me and everything else that depends on me would also fall apart. So I was not okay. And to this day, I still don't know. I still don't know how, I was able to maintain my sanity through it all. Nobody but God.
Yeah. So what was your breaking point? When did you decide to leave?
So all of this took place while I was studying at U of H, and I was living on campus in the upperclassmen dorms. I graduated. Once I graduated, we moved into an apartment. We moved into an apartment together. And actually around this time, his aunt, the one who had raised him, had passed away. I was already planning to end the relationship after I graduated. Mm-hmm. Not because of the milestone in my life, but because I felt like it would be the easiest time for me to break away from him. And then when that happened, he lost his aunt. And I felt bad for him again. So it made me stick around much longer than I was expecting to. But what I will say is when I made up in my mind that it was time for this relationship to end, I began to think about how I was going to leave because I knew he wasn't going to allow me to leave peacefully. Mm-hmm. And he was noticing a shift in me. So, ladies, those of you who may be in an abusive relationship, when you start to change and shift your mind and your heart, he's going to know. She's going to know. Ladies and gentlemen, because women can be abusers as well. Mm-hmm. They will know. And when you start to shift, they're going to notice the change in you. And he started to notice the quote unquote change in me. He could see that I was starting to gain some of my self back, that I was starting to, find a strength somewhere. I just got tired. Mm-hmm. I got tired of wanting to go to sleep. Why do I want to not be alive and live this life because of one person? I don't know. It's just like a light switch went off, and the part of me that I had buried to appease him started to pull itself back out. And I believe it also has to do with the fact that I reconnected myself with church. I stopped allowing him to keep me from going to church. So he would just argue with himself in the morning, and I would get up and go to church. He would tear up the house and I would still get dressed. He tried to keep me from going to church. He would tear up our apartment, break things, pin me and push me up against the wall. He would physically try to restrain me from going to church, and I would leave. I would still leave. And I would tell him, you can take everything else from me, but you cannot take my relationship with God. And I believe that he knew that if he allowed me to reconnect with that would strengthen me, and that, that would give me what I needed to pull away from him. And it did, so I started to go back to church. And in the midst of all of this, I felt bad for him. So I was still in a relationship with him. But my goal was to help him get on his feet, because he didn't have anything. Everything he had was because of me. And so we moved into the apartment. I helped him furnish it and I put everything together. And a couple of weeks after we moved into the apartment, I was just sitting there and I was like, it's time. I can't do it anymore. And I had already, like I said, thought through in my head what I was going to do, where I was going to go. So I had a plan. And it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, but it was enough. And at that point in time, I just made up in my mind that things didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to be what I wanted them to be. I didn't even have to be going to an environment that I wanted to be in. Anywhere was better than where I was. And then I also forgot to mention that at this point in our relationship, like I said, he could see that I was regaining my strength and my fortitude back. So he began to become physically violent with me. See, my abusive relationship didn't start off with him hitting on me. It started off with him manipulating me emotionally, breaking me psychologically, making me feel like I wasn't worthy, making me feel like I was damaged goods. He would literally tell me, you're damaged goods. You're like a dented can of, vegetables. Like, nobody wants that can of vegetables at the store. Who's going to want to be in a relationship with you? So he started breaking my mind. He started breaking my heart. He started breaking, my perception of myself. And he made me see myself the way he saw me, or the way he wanted me to see myself. And then once he couldn't do that anymore, then he started to try to break me physically. Then he began to become, well, I take that back. Well, physically, and because he also raped me. So I withheld sex from him. And, when he couldn't break me emotionally and mentally anymore, he started to force himself on me. He started to coerce me into having sex with him, and he became physically violent with me. And it was at that point to where, I reasoned with myself that I couldn't do it anymore. That I wasn't going to subject myself to that. You can say what you want to say to me. You can think what you want to think to me, but I cannot allow you to violate my body.
Yeah.
And I can't allow you to beat on me. And so I couldn't take it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Him becoming sexually and physically violent with me, I couldn't do it. That I couldn't deal with. And I just packed my stuff up. I packed up a small bag, just an overnight bag, and I left. And this is the thing. I didn't plan the day I was going to leave. I just did what my gut told me to do. I was literally sitting in the middle of the floor, working on a puzzle. And it just clicked. It's time to go. I packed my bag and I got up and I left, and I never went back. I didn't care about anything that was in that apartment. I left everything there. I left all the TVs, the furniture, and we had just moved in that apartment. So everything was brand new and everything was purchased with my money. There's nothing that was worth me taking or worth me wanting to hold on to that was more important than my sanity and my safety and my body. I left it all. He could have it all. And I left and I went and I stayed at a friend's house for a couple of weeks, because immediately after I left, when he figured out I wasn't coming back, he went to my parents' house looking for me. He actually parked outside of the parking lot in front of their apartment, and he stayed there for 3 days waiting for me to come. And every day I would call my mom and I would ask her, is he still out there? Is he, because my plan was to go to stay with her because I didn't have anywhere else to go.
Mhm.
Although my mom was not in the best place, I didn't have anywhere else to go. The only place I could go was to my mom's, until I could get my own place. And I had just put so much money into that apartment. I didn't have anything, to go and get my own apartment. And in my mind, I was going to wait, get that apartment set up. And then I was going to wait and leave when I had the money to get my own apartment. But I was like, no, I can't. I can't do that. I can't, prolong my safety and my life and my joy because I want to wait until my bank account allows me to do so. If
Mhm.
I have to sleep on a bus stop, I will. Um, but yeah, so I packed the bag and I left. And as I predicted, he didn't let me go peacefully. Like I said, he sat outside my mom's place for 3 days when I initially left, waiting for me. He didn't go home. He just sat in the parking lot. Um, and finally, after those 3 days he left, I was able to go back home. But the next day, uh, he came up. He came up to my job. So he found me, anywhere he could. Like for the first 3 months, first 4 months actually, after I left him, I couldn't stay in one place. I was bouncing around from place to place, from this friend's house to that friend's house. I didn't have a place to stay. I had no stability because I had to be 2 steps ahead of him because he knew where I would go, so I had to bounce around. I had to change my phone number, everything. Um, because he did what he could to find me. And then when he realized that he was not going to be able to track me down from, my friend's house, or, from any social people that he knew that I would probably reach out to, he would just park in front of my parents' house and stay there for days and days and days, to the point to where my mom had to call the police because he wouldn't leave.
Mhm. That's intimidating.
Very.
You said a lot of things that I just want to repeat because I think they were so profound. Sometimes working with my patients, we put together a plan because, like you said, he can, or the abuser can notice when you have decided you're done. And you do say, don't change anything. Do everything the way you've done it, even if you have to force tears, do everything the way you've done it. Because the moment they notice a change, that could be lethal.
Yes.
You know, um, and I like what you said that it didn't have to be perfect, but anywhere was better than here.
Yes.
Because that's something I think I can do better as a clinician because I'm like, oh, what's this environment like? Is it this? Is it that? But honestly, the goal is just to get out and we will figure things out once we're out. That's the first goal. And I like that you just packed a bag. That's it. Because I feel like I'm like, oh, my stuff, I want my stuff. I bought this stuff. And it's materials. You'll work, you'll get more money, you'll buy more things in due time. But you can't do those things if you're not here, if you're not living. And that's the most important thing is to ensure that your livelihood is secured and then we can figure out the rest of those pieces of the puzzle later. So I'm glad you said that. For clarification, was he there when you left?
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I only packed one small bag also was because I didn't want to trigger to him that I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to give myself time to kind of get settled and to get somewhere and to, I wanted to give myself time to not have to run from him, not to have to worry about him coming to look for me. So I figured if I only take, a small bag, he won't notice that I've taken a lot of stuff. And it'll give me time to kind of get somewhere and to clear my head. Like I just needed to get out of that environment so that I could think and clear my head and, kind of just gather myself and to just be free, just to feel unshackled, uh, to that environment, to that person, because even when he wasn't there, I still felt him.
Absolutely.
It was like You would think that there were cameras in our apartment. I just felt like he was always there. I never felt like I was home. I feel like this was his place. This was his environment. I'm just a visitor here, and so I just needed to get away from that. Even though my stuff was there, even though pictures of me were there, it didn't feel like it was my space.
Yeah.
Everything about that place was manipulation, and I just needed to get away. So, no, he was not there. He was at work. And so, but trust me, he had me on a schedule. So he knew, what time I should be home. He knew, like, it's the crazy things. He knew how long it took for me to get from our place to U of H. He knew how long it took me to get from my place to the grocery store, or to Walgreens. So if I told him, hey, I'm about to go to Walgreens, and if I wasn't back in 6 minutes and 30 seconds, he was calling me, where are you? It's been 6 minutes. The store is only 6 minutes. Where are you? Or you must be with the man. It don't take that long to go to the store. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make a move. I couldn't look at anyone. I couldn't aspire to go or do or be anything without without being interrogated about it. Because in his mind, everything that didn't have to do with him was about another man.
That type of control is just suffocating. It's like you can't breathe. You can't be a person.
When I tell you, okay, this is probably gonna blow your mind. He would accuse me of having sex with myself, of cheating on him with myself. He would tell me he would wake up in the middle of the night and he would snatch the covers off of me, and he would accuse me of pleasuring myself because I wouldn't have sex with him. Can you imagine what that's like to be dead sleep, to have the covers ripped off of you and the lights turned on and someone's shaking the bed and you're asleep? He will wake me out of my sleep.
That's intimidation. That's intimidation.
And he used it as a way to guilt trip me and to force me into being intimate with him, because I had to prove it. I had to prove that I'm not doing that. I had to prove it to him.
You're right. I am blown away. I can't even speak.
Because I was blown away by that. And I'm like, okay, this is taking this to a whole nother level. Yeah. Not only are you afraid of me being intimate with another man outside of you, you're myself. Right. You're accusing me of pleasuring myself to get over on you as a punishment to you for what I don't understand. And even if there was something that I was doing, you wouldn't let me breathe in peace long enough to do so. I didn't go to the bathroom with the door closed. I didn't take a shower with the door closed.
Okay. Through all of that and his tactics, it sounds like you still were able to have a supportive group of people who helped you. How did you reach out to those people? Were they apprehensive to help? Were they ready to help?
So I would say the most supportive person, that there were two people who were extremely supportive to me through this process. One of them was my spiritual mentor. Her name is Minister Patterson, and she has an organization that is devoted to domestic violence, human and sex trafficking, called Dove's Ministry. At the time, her ministry wasn't formed, but she was still doing the work because it's one of her passions, and she's also been a victim of domestic violence. And so, once I got past the shame and when I realized I was ready, I reached out to her, and she jumped to help me. She had been knowing me since I was 14 years old, so the fact that I hadn't brought this to her earlier, she was floored by it, but she understood because she was a victim herself, or I don't want to say victim because I don't like to use that word. She was a survivor herself, so while she was floored that I, didn't feel safe to come and talk to her about it, she totally understood and she didn't judge me. And that was the most healing thing, because a lot of times when, women who are in abusive relationships, or when they speak about it or when they talk about it, the overwhelming question that I always get, or that I always hear, is, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just go? But people don't understand. There's so many layers to being in an abusive relationship. It's not always that easy. And sometimes the manipulation and the psychological, the breaking of your sense of self, and the psychological impacts of all of that, sometimes it folds into trauma that you haven't even dealt with, that has nothing to do with that relationship. So it exacerbates existing trauma that you already have, things that you haven't already dealt with, and now you're loading additional trauma on top of it. And on top of that, you're isolated, and you don't feel like you have a safe place to go. And on top of that, it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, 10, 12 years later, 15, 16, almost 20 years later, because that relationship went on for 6 years. It's hard to talk about. I've been fighting back tears through this whole thing, just taking myself, thinking about, everything that I endured, and even myself now, I think to myself, why, Princess, why? You didn't deserve it. But at that time in my mind, I did. That was the best I was ever going to get. And I just wanted so bad to be loved by somebody. I wanted so bad to have a sense, of community, and to have someone around me. And I grew up without that. I grew up without my father, so, I grew up without my mother. I was torn away from the only family that I really had, which was my brothers and sisters. So, in essence, I had been alone, and I had been feeling, disconnected from, love and family and acceptance. You first learn how to be accepted in who you are, from your family, from your parents, your mom and your dad. They are the first people to show you unconditional love. They are the first people to tell you that you're beautiful, or that you're smart, or that you're good enough. But when you don't grow up with that, and when you don't have your mom, when you don't have your dad, and when you're homeless and you don't have, stability, and when you don't have someone, your the nucleus of your family giving you that, that assurance, you grow up not really knowing who you are and what your worth is. And I struggled with that, and he played on that. And so, the fact that I wasn't judged when I went to her, that she didn't ask me that question that all of us survivors of domestic violence hate to hear. We hate that question. Why didn't you just leave? Because it's not that easy. If I could have left, if I could have just gotten up and left, I would have gone. It's not that easy. So the fact that I didn't, have to deal with judgment, and I was just embraced and supported by her, that was everything. And then my mother, although my mother, was dealing with her addiction, she was dealing with her own issues, and my mom has a story all her own that is amazing and powerful, and I'm so proud of her. But she was dealing with what she was going through. She did her best to be available to me, and she did the best thing anybody could have done. She opened up a room to me, and that was where I stayed. It wasn't the best environment, but it was better than what I was dealing with there, with him. It wasn't the most stable, but at least I had a room that I can go into, and I can close the door, and I didn't have to worry about someone waking me up out of my sleep, you know, um, trying to hurt me, and I just had to pick what monster I wanted to deal with, and my mom gave me safety. That's all she had to give me. She couldn't do anything else for me, but she gave me a room to stay in, and I don't know where I would be right now had I not had her, um, and Minister Patterson. They were very instrumental in helping me, get back on my feet and find myself again.
That's beautiful. I'm so happy you had that.
Yeah.
So happy. And I really appreciate you saying that. Because I think some people, when they have someone they love in a relationship with abuse, they get angry at the person. They get irritated with the person, like, just leave, just leave, just leave. And they don't understand the nuances of it, right? And like you said, like, I'm being shook out of my sleep and put on trial at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't think they understand what that does to a person, how that truly disrupts you as a person, your mode of thinking, because you were in survival.
Mhm.
And people in survival can only think of the next step.
Mhm.
There is no, oh, I should just leave. That's so far ahead, right? That requires planning and all that, and you don't have the capacity to plan. People don't have the capacity to think because they're truly just they're walking on eggshells, trying to survive. Like, I don't want to do anything to disrupt any type of peace that I have been allowed or afforded at this time. And in addition to that, it's not always bad. And that's a part of the manipulation. And we talk about the cycle of abuse. And we have what is the honeymoon phase, which is where it's lovey-dovey, flowers, laughs, movies, dates, dinners, all those grand things that all relationships have, right? But that is the grooming of the abuser. And they use that to manipulate the person that they want to control. And then we get into the next phase, which is tension building, right? Things aren't right, some little words here and there, but the abuse hasn't really started yet in any capacity. It's just looks or stares or comments, things that make you a little uncomfortable, but most people still continue on because there's really nothing going on. And then we get to when the abuse starts. So that could be the intimidation, like you've experienced significantly, the name calling, the demeaning, putting the person down, dismissing their feelings, the finance controlling, the socialing controlling, all of that happens. And then we go back to the start.
Mhm.
There's apologies. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. And then for a while, things are good. And the thing I believe a lot of people don't realize is it's still a relationship. And there's still real feelings there. There's still real love there. And when love and emotions get tangled in it, it's so hard because we want to see the best in the people we care about, regardless of who they are. And if it's your significant other, you definitely want to see them in the best light. And most of us do. And we tend to push away those things that don't align with that. And we don't discuss that enough in these relationships that have abuse. And we don't humanize and empathize with this person that all they want is for their partner to be who they presented themselves to be or who they know they can be. Because partners who abuse can still be sweet, right? But they just want that consistently. And so that's the hard part too. And so, like you said, the no judgment. Like, I can speak my piece, but ultimately my hands are tied until the person is ready to leave. And what we know in research is that it takes 7 times before a person leaves for good. So they leave, the flowers, the crying, the promises, they go back, and we just start that cycle again, you know? And I'm pretty sure had you not had the ability to stay away from him, that would have been your fate as well.
I probably would have. I probably would have went back.
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, because everything you're saying is absolutely factual. When things were really good with us, they were really good. He was romantic. He was sweet. He was considerate. He was kind.
Mm-hmm.
He was attentive, but he was a monster. And it was so confusing to me. It was like, how can you be this amazing person and then this ugly person at the same time? And I fell in love with the amazing person. And it wasn't until, you know, he was also in love with me until, we began to have those intense emotional feelings that all of this stuff came out. And by then it's too late. It's like, okay, well, I love him already. So, and like you said, because I loved him and because I thought I was going to have a future with him, we had, invested so much time into each other. I didn't fall out of him. I'm sorry, I didn't fall out of love with him until about 4 years into our relationship, 4.5 years of our relationship, and our relationship was 6 years long.
Mm-hmm.
So for the majority of our relationship, I was head over heels in love with him. And like you said, I just wanted to see the best in him. I wanted to see more of that romantic, caring, compassionate guy. I know he's in there. Maybe if I just love him enough, maybe if I'm just supportive enough to him, maybe if I'm just patient enough, maybe if we just pray enough together and go to church, and maybe if we fast together, and I just kept coming up with all of these mechanisms and remedies to heal the brokenness in our relationship, and holding our faith, praying and everything. But I just finally realized I can't love him enough. I can't love him enough to want to treat me the way that I deserve to be treated. And I'm not perfect. I was never perfect, but I didn't deserve that. And I think that's what survivors of abuse need to know. You don't have to be perfect to deserve respect, to deserve not to be beaten and raped and jerked up out of your sleep, being put under a microscope and chastised, because of somebody else's insecurities. You deserve better. And you have to be perfect to get it, and I hear a lot of people say that, well, I'm not perfect either. You don't have to be perfect to be respected. And I just, I just kept holding out, thinking that he's going to change. He's going to change. He's going to change. I can love him through it. I'm just going to be patient with him. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want to change. He was comfortable being who he was. We have to accept that it doesn't matter how much you love someone. You can't love someone into change. They have to deal with and work through their own issues before they can truly learn how to love and respect somebody else. Because a lot of times they have their own issues that they need to work through that's causing them to treat you the way that they're treating you. They have their own trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that earlier, that you would try to do different things to improve the relationship. And I want to highlight that that comes from the conditioning from the abuser. If you had done this, I wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
Right. And they make their mistreatment or abuse the result of the oppressed behavior. So had you not said this, or I don't like that, and they make it all your fault. And so what that does over time to the survivor is like, okay, well, let me just do this better, or let me not mess up, or let me not get him upset or her upset, right? And so they have taken on, the ideology of the abuser, that the nature of the relationship is a result of them. And so if they're making it bad, they believe they can make it better. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because as you said, that's that person's decision. And I want people who are in relationships with abuse to know that nothing you do will make them hate you, and nothing you will do can stop them from hating you or abusing you in any capacity. It's really on them and the decisions that they're making, because we're all responsible for ourselves. So I say to my patients, we're all responsible for ourselves. And one of the first lessons in life is to keep your hands to yourself.
That's
you
right.
see the baby moving around, oh, don't touch that. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't hit them, right? It's one of the first lessons we get. And so there is no excuse. There's nothing someone can do that will qualify acceptance for you to be hurt in any capacity. And even perfection. No one is perfect. So I don't know why that word keeps getting brought up. It doesn't exist. It's not real. We'll never reach it. So if we're never perfect, that means we can never expect a healthy partner, a loving partner. That doesn't make any sense
at all. But these are the things that we tell ourselves to make excuses.
Absolutely.
To make excuses for their behavior, mm-hmm. and to justify our need to do more to make it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were protecting the person too.
Absolutely.
Because if it's something with us and they're okay, they're not doing anything wrong, we can fix it, and not recognizing and holding them accountable for their behavior as well.
Absolutely. I agree.
One short thing I would like to touch on before we move on to the happy ending is vulnerability. So you kind of discussed that a little earlier about how you were more vulnerable to be with someone who's an abuser. So I want to put some context in that and then allow you to kind of fill in the pieces. When I say vulnerable, certain situations make people a good candidate for relationships with abuse. And it's not that abusers sniff them out, because I think they try everyone until it sticks. That's what I think. And so you find a person and you find a way in and you use that to your advantage. And it's that vulnerability. So like you said, someone who's had, a childhood of neglect, right? Like you said, or, separation from family, longing for a connection with someone, like a deep, intimate connection with someone. Those are the things that you had lacked significantly growing up. And then you found an opportunity to have it and you wanted to hold on to it, understandably so. And that's something someone who doesn't mean well for you can take advantage of. That makes us vulnerable. Whether it's just getting out of a bad relationship and just wanting to be wanted, wanting to be loved, for example, those little things can make us vulnerable. And so the point I'm trying to convey for anyone listening is that be really careful when you know if you have a history. So if you just got out of a bad relationship and you just want to be loved, be very careful with who you accept love from, because it may not be the best, right? Or if like you said, you have unresolved trauma from your childhood, that may be connected to the type of partner you select for yourself as well. And typically when we have unresolved trauma for our childhoods, we're just extending it to adulthood. And we're going to look for those characteristics in a partner, just prolonging the trauma. So kind of be mindful of that as well. Like it really helps to resolve that trauma to the best of your ability before we start trying to connect, because we then find ourselves in situations with trauma bonding. And most of the time, trauma bonding is not healthy. It doesn't work out. You would think having similar backgrounds, you can understand each other better. But as you stated, Princess, not quite, not the way you think it would. Because like you said, both people are trying to build, and if one isn't, misery loves company, and they will bring the person down. And because of that person's background, they're more vulnerable to be brought down.
Absolutely. And you said something that really stuck out to me, that if one person is trying to build and do better and grow from it, and the other person is not, then that creates a conflict. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I experienced with my ex. I was in college. He was not. I was on a road to, having a career. He was unemployed. It was just, he would even say things like, why do you want to go to college anyway? Are you trying to find, somebody else to marry, a professional man? It's just, it's bad. It's bad, so if that person is not trying to grow beyond that trauma, then that's definitely a red flag. If they're comfortable in it, if they just want to stay there, if they don't want to do the work to be better, to do better, it's bad. It won't turn out good.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the happy ending, with the time that we have left. You're currently married, in a happy, healthy relationship. My first question is, how did you prepare yourself to be in a healthy relationship? Because as I stated, we don't resolve things, you drag it with you, right? So how did you prepare yourself to be in a healthy relationship?
Oh, that is a great question. I did a lot of work on myself. I had to have very real conversations and very real conflicts and confrontations with people in my life that contributed to the trauma that made me susceptible to being victimized in that type of relationship. I had to confront my biological father. Because I have abandonment issues when it comes to him. Most young girls, we look to our fathers to see what examples of a nice gentleman is, we look to our parents, the relationships that our parents are in to show us what does a healthy relationship look like? What does it look like when someone truly loves you, and how do you resolve conflict with somebody you're in a relationship with? I didn't grow up seeing those things because my biological father wasn't around. My mom and my stepdad, although my stepdad has been in my life since I was 5 years old, he and my mom were codependent on each other, and they were co-addicts together. They exacerbated each other's addiction. So, and a lot of the domestic violence that I saw was between them. Their drug abuse accelerated, the violence within the home, and it wasn't good. And along with the trauma that I experienced independently from decisions that they made that just negatively impacted me, just from people around me that I didn't even know. I also, just saw things, jumping in the middle of fights, pulling him off of my mom, fighting, literally fist fighting my stepdad, trying to defend my mom. I've been thrown up against a few walls and into a few bookshelves by the both of them, trying to break up their fights. So I had to confront them and talk to them about, the collateral damage that I am as a result of the decisions that they made. And then I also had to accept that they are who they are. And no matter, and just as with my relationship with my ex, it doesn't matter how much I love either one of them. I can't love my mom into sobriety. And I can't love my biological father into being the father figure that I need for him to be in my life. I had to accept them for who they were, and I had to stop looking at myself as not good enough, because I remember as a little girl, growing up, I always felt like, well, it must be me, my mom or my dad, neither one of them, wanted me. So something must be wrong with me. Why don't you love me enough? And I remember asking my mom, when I was little, why don't you love me enough just to stop doing drugs? And I remember, asking my biological father, how could you just know that I'm alive and you can just abandon me and not care? And I had to come to terms. I would have to say that my relationship with my parents was the biggest contributing factor as to how I perceive relationships, and in turn, how I perceive myself and what I felt like my own worth was, and how I felt like I needed to find that in a partner. And I tried to fill a hole. I tried to fill the absence of my parents with the love of a man. And I felt like, well, if I wasn't good enough to stick around for my mom and my dad, then surely, I can't be picky about what man is going to be in my life. And so those are the issues that I had to deal with, as far as relationships are concerned. I had to come to terms with those, and I had to have those conversations with them, and I had to confront them, and I had to, I had to own my part in it, and how, I allowed it to overcome me. And I needed to confront them, and I needed them to take ownership. But I also needed to accept the fact that they may not take ownership, and that was okay. And that's not because I wasn't good enough. So to this day, I still don't have a relationship with my father. But my relationship with my mom and my stepdad, who I consider my dad, is phenomenal. They are my biggest support system right now. I'm sorry. And I thank God for that, because there was a time in my life where their addiction was so bad that I thought that I was going to lose the both of them. And, in so many ways, my mom has given me, both of them are giving me everything that I never had as a child by giving it to my daughter. And that's all I ever wanted. I told them, that, you weren't able to be the parents that I needed you to be for me. You weren't able to protect me from the things that I went through as a little girl. You weren't able to show me, what I needed to learn in order to be, to be strong and to fight against, these different situations that I face in life. But you can pay it forward to me now that you have your life together, and now that you're clean, by giving it to my daughter. Everything that you never were to me, just do it to my daughter. And that's exactly who they are and what they are. And I thank God for them. And I'm so extremely proud of them, because I feel like a little girl again. I can call on my mom if I need something. I can call on my dad. If I need something, he walked me down the aisle at my wedding, and they're everything to me. And that matters so much because I never thought I would have them. I never thought that I would have parents. And so healing that part of my life was really important, for me to, I had to own that was something that had me really broken. And I had to do that work. I had to do that work with them before, I allowed myself to be in a relationship with somebody else, because I had to learn my worth. And I had to learn that my worth was not wrapped up in the deficiencies of my parents, that they were going through their own things. They had their own struggles and battles, and it's not my fault that they didn't know how to deal with their own issues. And I had to forgive them, and I just had to heal. I just had to do the work on myself. Mm-hmm. And I also had to realize that the work is ever going. Mm-hmm. That I still have triggers. I still have, situations to where I'm triggered. And I remember, or I may re-experience something that I went through in that, in those traumatic interactions with my ex, and I had to have, conversations with my husband. And I had to be honest and open with him about those things, those triggers. Mm-hmm. And so I had to do the work, and I had to be honest, and I had to be real, and I had to be willing to have the hard conversations. And I had to realize that, it's okay to talk about it, and to talk about it and to have experienced it doesn't make me weak. I'm strong because I was able to get past it. I'm strong because while I was in it, I survived it.
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of survivors of domestic violence realize how strong they are. Mm-hmm. It takes strength even to endure the things that you're being subjected to. That takes a lot of strength. And so I just had to give myself credit. I had to give myself credit for everything that I've been through. And I just had to do the work on myself. And first of all, learn how to love me and learn what my own value is. And confront those demons that I felt like contributed, to the misrepresentation of healthy relationships that I had.
I love that. I love that. Do the work. Have uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. And forgiveness. Forgiveness is so hard. Mm-hmm. But it's not about anyone but you, because forgiveness is the person releasing that baggage, releasing that pain, releasing that history. It's not about saying the other person got away with it. And I know forgiveness is hard, but I'm happy you reached that level. And acceptance, accepting people for who they are, accepting situations for what they are or what they were. So like you said, I didn't get to have those parents. Mm-hmm. And you have made your peace with that. But I have them now. Mm-hmm. My daughter has those grandparents. Mm-hmm. Right? And, looking at what you have versus what you don't, acknowledging the deficits, but like you said, not allowing that to run you, not allowing that to be your focal point of where your worth comes from. Because we all have it. If we stick and say, well, I don't have this, and I didn't get that, and this happened to me, it's a cycle that you stay in, and you'll drown. Yep. Right? You said so much. All of it was so profound. But yes, you have to do the work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We don't want to run to another person to savior. And then we put weight onto that new person. And that's not fair to them.
And that was important to me too, because the person that I would tell myself, the person that I choose to go into a relationship with next, it's going to have to be a very strong man. It's going to have to be a very patient man. It's going to have to be a very kind man, because I carry a lot of baggage. And, and I'm still doing the work. Like I said, there's still things that I can't, like I said, that trigger me so much to where there are things I don't watch on TV, certain scenes on movies. you know, there are just some things that I can't, and I needed someone who was going to be patient and kind and understanding when it comes to those, triggers. There may be something that'll set me off. Um, because that's just the reality of someone who's gone through trauma.
Yeah.
You've gone through trauma, you've lived it, but a piece of it stays with you sometimes. And you have to learn how to cope and move past it and not allow those memories, to keep you down. And so that was important to me. I didn't want to I didn't want to make my next partner pay for everything that he did. So it's important for me to get myself right and to come and to be really honest with myself about who I needed, what type of person, that I was going to be with, and the transparency that I would need to go into that relationship with.
Absolutely. Transparency. It goes so far. It
Mm-hmm.
goes so far, especially, when there are triggers and they
Mm-hmm.
need to kind of understand where it's coming from that has something to do with them. But, I'm happy that you were able to visualize the type of partner you wanted to have based on your needs.
Mm-hmm.
I need someone patient, someone understanding, someone kind, right? I think that helps too because sometimes people get into a relationship because they just like the person. Oh, this person's fun. I like them. But do they have what you need?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about what you said earlier about doing the work, getting to know yourself. Who am I? And yes, you have a trauma history, and that is a part of you. Like you said, it doesn't go away, but it doesn't define you,
Absolutely.
right? It's a part of your story and it'll never go, but that's not where you have to stay. But in doing that work, you learn who you are and what you need.
Absolutely.
And I think that's powerful. Knowing the type of partner you want to have, I think empowers anyone. Like, this is what I need. And not so much about qualities, but interpersonal characteristics. Based on who I am, do I need a person who's flexible or do I need a person who's more structured? Because I tend to be a little more flexible, right? So just knowing yourself, and that really helps a relationship fold well into itself because you're complementing each other. Because I have this, you need that. I have this, you need that. And we're meeting in the middle. So that's so beautiful. So, final question. How do you maintain your wellness now? Like you said, you still have triggers, you still have to do the work. This is a lifelong commitment. How
Mm-hmm.
do you continue to maintain wellness?
I think one of the biggest things that contributes to my wellness is this sharing my story. And I do it with students, with my kids, with the young people that I mentor, the young high school students, because they don't have a safe haven. They don't have anyone to talk to. And a lot of the students that I've worked with over the years, they act out, they quote unquote misbehave, they're deviant, as people would label them. And it's because they're dealing with trauma that they don't know how to deal with. You would be surprised at how many young people, high school students, are in abusive relationships or who have experienced abuse in some shape or form, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal, emotional abuse. How many of these kids don't know who they are, struggle with their own identity and their own self-confidence? And just knowing, the best part of sharing my story is when I tell the kids, because I'm honest with them, of course I keep it age appropriate, but I'm very transparent and I tell them the truth, because a lot of times when they look at me, they say, Miss A, I would have never thought, you look like you have it all together, you're married and you just seem so happy. And I would have never thought in a million years that you've gone through any of the things that you've told me. And what really just lit a fire under me to continue to do this is the fact that these kids have, a lot of my students have told me that I saved their life
Wow.
because they never thought that it was possible to do better, to be better, to have better, to experience better. No one ever showed them that it was possible to move past, the things that they were experiencing. They didn't see it in their own homes. They didn't have an example they, you know, they didn't have anything to follow, and they didn't have a support system. They didn't feel safe talking to anyone about it because they thought they were going to be judged, you know, dealing with that shame that comes with, you know, experiencing some of the traumas that we do. And so, you know, it's just, it does my heart, you know, so much service to know that I can make such a big impact by just simply sharing my story. um, that is, you know, the biggest thing that I would have to say that my life has given me is a story and a testimony.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is, be kind always. Everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. You know, and people can look at us sometimes and they can think that, oh man, they have it all together, but you never know what someone is going through. And the moment I begin to share my story, I crack them like an egg, and they're running all over the place, you know, because finally they have someone that they can talk to, and they identify with, you know, they identify with my story, but that they also identify with the glory, you know, with what God has done in my life. And they see, well, if you can get through it, and if you can do everything that you've done, and if you can be happy, and if you can have joy in your life, and if you can smile, I can have that too. So I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to keep going. So that's why I share my story. And that's why I share the things that I've been through, because I believe by faith that God brought me through it so that I could do this work. So that's the number one thing. Um, Other ways that I take care of myself is just simply family. I didn't grow up with family. Now I have family. My mother is well, my dad is well, my brothers and sisters are older now, so we're all able to come together when we want to come together. I have a daughter, I have a husband. You know, my in-laws are amazing and awesome. I have more family than I ever thought that I would ever have, you know, and so whenever I can, you know, outside of COVID-19, before COVID happened, you know, just soaking it up and spending time with family, because I went so much of my life without that experience. So that is just really good for my soul. And then, you know, makeup. I love makeup. I love YouTube. And so, you know, just coming in my room here, closing the door, pulling out my makeup brushes, turning on my camera and recording video content, interacting and engaging with, you know, my subscribers, you know, that's therapy for me, makeup therapy. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to sum up everything we've discussed because the gems are infinite. So one, let's just start working our way backwards. Wellness. Wellness is key, right? And just kind of recognizing that wellness is something that we're going to do forever. And it helps kind of protect us from the stresses of life, you know, and love and family that can help, but having something that fulfills you, that drives you, that's really great too. So the makeup, telling your story, you know, mentoring young children, you know, being there for people who really need them, or even just your philosophy, just being kind to everyone, because we don't know what they've gone through. That is so powerful in our wellness. Putting out positivity gives us positivity as well. When it comes to relationships, red flags, you know, see the red flags and respect the red flags. You know, try not to excuse them, you know, heed the warnings that they are. And, you know, as it gets worse, to know that you can leave. And materials don't mean anything. You can get up and leave, and you will improve and it will get better. And trust in someone who won't judge you. You know, remembering that support system. And I love that about your story, that no matter what you try to do to isolate you, the people who want to be there are going to be there, period. So for anyone who is in a relationship with abuse and you feel alone, you're not. They're still there. And they're waiting for that phone call or that text, or for you to show up at the door and ring the doorbell, whatever you need to do. No, they're there. And they're at a distance now, but they haven't gone. The love is still there. And don't be ashamed. Mm-hmm. It literally happens to anyone from any walk of life, any background. Yes, there are certain situations that can make you more susceptible or vulnerable, but honestly, if this happens in any class, in any race, any immigration background, education, all the categories that we define people, it happens in it, and so use that to know that I have survived this relationship and I can survive any type of embarrassment associated with that relationship. That is minimal to the scope of your life. And do the work. Once you get out of that relationship, do the work because you've been through a lot and we have to process this. How did we get here and how do we ensure we don't come back? That's the goal. And the consistent theme of forgiveness. So forgiveness for our background, our history, people who have wronged us, forgiveness to ourselves, because I'm sure a lot of people who are in relationships with abuse know this is not right. And once we leave, we can beat ourselves up about it, but forgive yourself for that. Forgive yourself for that and be able to process that moment. Again, kind of learn how did we get here and how do we ensure we don't go back. And for people who want to support people they love who are in abusive relationships, just be there and be ready. Yeah. Lecturing, unfortunately, doesn't help because they know what's going on. And lecturing sometimes puts out a projection of judgment.
Yes.
And that's the last thing we want to do. And so just saying, I'm here for you, just reinforcing your commitment to that person, I think will be the best thing that you can do to support. Because when the time comes, they will call. And so it's like, hey, I will be here. If you need to write my number on a piece of paper and save it, if you don't have access to your cell phone, but I'm going to be here and just demonstrating your commitment to that person. Princess, any other takeaways I missed?
I just want to say, I know that being in a relationship with abuse, as Iwune says, I know that it's scary. And I know that, a lot of times, we tend to think about all the things that we'll lose. But I want to encourage you by telling you this. Everything that I never thought I would have, everything that I thought I was losing, the minute I freed myself from that, I got more than I ever thought I would bargain for. Never thought that I would get married because I never thought that I would, I never thought that nobody would love me past everything that I've been through. Never thought that I would have children. It's not that I didn't want those things. It's just that for so long I was told that I would not be worthy. So I thought that my aspirations to have a family of my own and to have a happy, healthy marriage would be impossible. Don't allow what you're going through right now to keep you from the greatness and the fullness that your life can be. Because if I wouldn't have never walked away, I would not be where I am right now. And I cannot imagine my life any other way. So I just want you to be encouraged. And I do want you to know that it does get better. It really, really does. It really does. I swear it does. And you're stronger than you think you are.
Thank you so much, Princess.
Thank you.
Where can we find you?
Whoa, you can find me a lot of places. You can find me on YouTube. My name is I Am Princess on YouTube. On Instagram, my personal Instagram is I Am Princess A with 2 underscores. And if you would like to support my Black-owned business, you can find me at I Am Princess _ beauty on Instagram as well. I also have a vlog channel where you can follow my family if you want, and that's I Am Princess TV. So there's a lot of places you can find me if you would like to connect. And I plan on doing more discussions about this on my YouTube channel. And Dr. Iwane, you're welcome to invite me back anytime to have further discussions about this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I just appreciate you being comfortable to express yourself in front of the world and tell everyone your story and encourage people who are in a position that you have been in that it does get better. It does get better.
I promise it does.
Well, thank you again so much. And you look lovely. I'm wearing lip gloss from I Am Princess as well. Yeah. And I just want to personally recommend it. It's moisturizing. She has this great line called the Melanin Collection. It's not affiliated with Minds of Melanin, but maybe we can do something. She has different shades for different complexions. as well as other like reds, pinks, purples, etc. And again, it's moisturizing. So that's one of the things I really, really enjoy about it, because if you tried other glosses, you know that you have to put the bottom layer of like Vaseline or chapstick before you put on the gloss because it can dry you out. And that's not an experience I have with this one. And then she also has lashes, skincare. I mean, you really can get a full service there. So personal recommendation, just because I've used it and it's really good. So
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you
thank
so much.
you.
I'll give Iwune a coupon code for you guys so that if you try any of my products, then you guys can save some coins. You know, we like saving money.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you again. And thank you everyone for tuning in to the fourth episode of Reflections in Color. For more information on domestic violence resources, please go to mindsovermelanin.com.